Hello and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Amarachi Ubani. On the program this week, protests spread across the United States after another U.S. citizen is fatally shot by federal agents in Minneapolis. Plus, Israel retrieves the remains of the final hostage held in Gaza, clearing the way for the next phase of a U.S.-backed peace plan. More protests have erupted across the United States this week after a second fatal shooting involving federal immigration agents in less than a month in the city of Minneapolis. Protesters say the deaths expose a pattern of unchecked force by immigration and customs enforcement as political tensions between state leaders and the White House continue to escalate.
Chants of "Stop ICE" echoed through downtown Minneapolis as dozens of demonstrators gathered outside the office of U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar, demanding an end to funding for federal immigration enforcement. The protest follows the killing of 37-year-old ICU nurse Alex Pretty, who was shot dead by immigration and customs enforcement agents on Saturday. It was the second fatal shooting involving ICE in the city, after 37-year-old mother of three, Renee Nicole Good, was also killed by an ICE agent earlier in January. Demonstrators accuse federal authorities of operating with impunity and say elected officials must be held accountable.
Amy Klobuchar holds power right now to either vote for or against increased DHS funding. But now is not the time to be talking about or voting on reform, about increasing funding to ICE so we can buy them body cameras or give them more training. People are being kidnapped off the streets and disappeared. In less than 3 weeks, ICE has executed 2 people and shot 1 other in Minneapolis.
On Saturday, dozens of anti-ICE protesters targeted a hotel believed to be housing federal agents, leading to clashes with riot police. The Department of Homeland Security says Pretty approached Border Patrol agents with a handgun and violently resisted arrest, prompting an officer to open fire in self-defense. But Minnesota's governor disputes that account.
The individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently. Fearing for his life and for the lives of his fellow officers around him, an agent fired defensive shots. Medics were on the scene immediately and attempted to deliver medical aid to the subject, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect also had 2 magazines with ammunition in them that held dozens of rounds. He also had no ID. This looks like a situation where an individual arrived at this scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement. About hundreds of protesters then showed up at the scene. They began to obstruct and to assault law enforcement officers. We saw objects being thrown at them, including ice and other objects, and a rampant assault began, and even an HSI officer agent's finger was bitten off. Crowd control measures were deployed to bring safety to the public and to law enforcement at the scene. And once again, I want to remind everybody that this situation and this tragedy did not have to happen. Our law enforcement are doing everything that they can to protect the public.
Governor Tim Walz has condemned the shooting as sickening, accusing federal authorities of spreading misinformation and refusing to hand over evidence.
The world knows how he died. He died at the hands of ICE agents on the streets of Minneapolis. They want us to make sure we said how he lived. So to Michael and Susan, our deepest sympathies, but you have my commitment to continue to tell that story. So now we've got 2 Minnesotans dead. We didn't had time to start telling Renee's story of a poet and a mother and a bright spirit, and now we're telling Alex's story. So my question is, what's the plan, Donald Trump? What is the plan? What do we need to do to get these federal agents out of our state? You thought fear, violence, and chaos is what you wanted from us, and you clearly underestimated the people of this state and nation. We are tired. but we're resolved. We're peaceful, but we'll never forget. We're angry, but we won't give up hope. And above all else, we are clearly unified.
President Donald Trump has defended ICE, accusing state leaders of inciting unrest.
Let's be clear about the circumstances which led to that moment on Saturday. This tragedy occurred as a result of a deliberate and hostile resistance by Democrat leaders in Minnesota. For weeks, Governor Walz and the Mayor Jacob Frey and other elected Democrats were spreading lies about federal law enforcement officers who are risking their lives daily to remove the worst criminal illegal aliens from our streets: murderers, rapists, pedophiles, human traffickers, and gang members. Governor Walz and Mayor Frey have shamefully blocked local and state police from cooperating with ICE, actively inhibiting efforts to arrest violent criminals. They have also used their platforms to encourage left-wing agitators to stalk, record, confront, and obstruct federal officers who are just trying to lawfully perform their duties, which has created dangerous situations threatening both these officers and the general public and Minnesotans alike. This is precisely what unfolded in Minneapolis on Saturday morning. Obstructing federal law enforcement and inciting violence against officers is wrong and illegal.
Vigils have been held across Minneapolis to remember Pretty, while demonstrations have spread beyond the U.S. In London, protesters marched in solidarity, calling for an end to aggressive immigration enforcement and warning of what they describe as rising authoritarianism.
To Alex Pretty, the ICU nurse shot in the street. To little Liam Ramos, the 5-year-old boy with his backpack on his way home from school, detained by ICE. Our message to them is we remember you.
For years we have been watching it limp along and get a little bit worse and a little bit worse, a little bit worse, and we've come into rooms and we've said the same things to each other. But now it's getting so bad.
The Minneapolis killings come as the Trump administration expands ICE's budget and mandate as part of its mass deportation drive.
What ICE is doing is lawless disorder. What ICE is doing is state-sanctioned thuggery, and it must be stopped. ICE must leave Minnesota today, not tomorrow, not next week, but today. There are reports that the president is thinking about a reduction in force. A reduction isn't good enough. President Trump should act now to completely withdraw ICE and immediately turn down the temperature.
The president has threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, a move that would allow the deployment of U.S. troops for domestic law enforcement.
And over at the United Nations, world leaders and Holocaust survivors have marked International Holocaust Remembrance Day with stark warnings about the rise of anti-Semitism and the dangers of indifference. 80 years after the liberation of Auschwitz, speakers warned that the lessons of the Holocaust are not confined to history, but remain urgently relevant today.
Addressing the annual Holocaust Memorial at the United Nations, Secretary-General Antonio Guterres remembered the 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis, warning that the forces which enabled the Holocaust are resurfacing.
The Holocaust, after all, is not only history, it is a warning that hatred, once unleashed, can consume everything. Excellencies, dear friends, today that warning feels more urgent than ever. Anti-Semitism around the world is raging. Jewish communities live in fear. Synagogues attacked, families shattered, vile anti-Semitic hatred racing across cyberspace. So let us together pledge to stand against anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred, and against bigotry, racism, and discrimination anywhere, and everywhere.
The president of the UN General Assembly, Annalena Baerbock, echoed that message, warning that dehumanization always begins the same way.
Questioning the rights of some simply for who they are, where they come from, or what the color of their skin is, has all the same end: dehumanization, which eventually spreads to all. As back then, German Pastor Martin Niemöller warned and engraved at the Holocaust Memorial in Boston, Massachusetts, in a longer version, I quote, "When they came for the Jews, I did not speak up. I wasn't a Jew. When they came for the Catholics, I did not speak up. I was a Protestant. When they came for me, no one was left to speak up." Never again is not a slogan. It's a duty to speak up and to stand up, to defend the dignity and human rights, not of some, but of every member of our human family, everywhere, every day.
Holocaust survivors also shared deeply personal testimony. Evelyn Conrad, who fled Hungary as a child, recalled witnessing her mother being pushed into the street by Nazi sympathizers in Vienna.
In May 1939, we got the French visas. After my mother and I boarded the train in Budapest, I never saw my Hungarian family again. On the train, I was so excited because I'd soon see my beloved grandmother, my Omoti, again. I also looked forward to walking on the familiar streets in Vienna. But outside the train station, Vienna looked gray, glum. As we crossed the bridge into Leopoldstadt, I heard the thunder of jackboots marching toward us from the Prater. I saw very few people on the Praterstrasse. Those I saw were hurrying, staying close to the walls of the old buildings. We crossed from the trolley to Omoti's building. Two large women in dirndls approached us, where they should have had sprigs of alpine roses or flowers pinned to their dirndls. Each had one large Hakenkreuz, swastika. They marched toward us as if we were not there. It happened so fast. They pushed my beautiful, slender mother off the sidewalk into the street. I ended up with 1 foot on the sidewalk, 1 foot on the street. My mother held my hand tight. I tried to break my mother's grip. I wanted to run after those two big women. They didn't even look back. I wanted to bite them, to kick them, to scratch them. My mother dug her nails into my arm. Suddenly, I was afraid.
The commemorations come as new data from UNESCO shows anti-Semitism is increasingly present in schools across Europe, with more than 3/4 of teachers reporting incidents between students.
Europe emerged from the Holocaust carrying the weight of what had been done and the knowledge of how easily it had happened. We believed this was a lesson learned, a hatred confined to the past. But anti-Semitism was never extinguished. It survived, it adapted, and today it still casts its shadow across our continent and beyond. Today, anti-Semitism spreads faster and wider than ever, amplified online and on social media. Lies travel in seconds. Old conspiracies are given new life, and the consequences are terrifyingly real, as we were reminded most recently on Bondi Beach, where Jewish families celebrating Hanukkah were shot down in cold blood. And yet, despite the pain and the loss, Jewish life continues to flourish, and Europe must ensure that it is protected. It is up to us to confront hatred wherever it happens, before it is allowed to take root again.
International Holocaust Remembrance Day is observed each year on the 27th of January, marking the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, where more than 1 million people were murdered. Ceremonies were also held across Europe, including at the former death camp in Poland and memorials in Berlin and Brussels.
When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, we meet the latest Guinness World Record holder, now championing sustainable practices after crossing the Philippines on foot. To stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. After more than 2 years of war, Israel says the last hostage held in Gaza has finally been brought home. It's a development that clears the way for the next phase of U.S. President Donald Trump's peace plan.
For the first time since 2014, there are now no Israeli hostages dead or alive left in Gaza after the military recovered the body of the last remaining hostage held in Gaza. US President Donald Trump welcomed the development, calling it a significant step forward as his administration moves to activate the next phase of its Gaza peace and reconstruction plan.
The last remaining body of the hostages, Israeli hostages in Gaza, has been returned. This is a huge foreign policy feat for the President of the United States, for the State of Israel, and frankly for the whole world. The President made the impossible possible, and so it's great news for the President, for the United States, for our allies, and also for peace in the Middle East. And I understand that more than 20 new additional countries have also signed up to join the newly established Board of Peace with respect to the rebuilding of Gaza, which is another historic accomplishment for this president.
But as diplomatic focus shifts to reconstruction, life in Gaza remains defined by loss and uncertainty. Aid agencies say that while the ceasefire has reduced airstrikes, people are still dying from exposure, untreated illness, and a humanitarian system stretched to breaking point.
While there are all these agreements on the shape and the form of reconstruction, the people of Gaza cannot wait. They need supplies at the same time. It's not just the services. This is why it's absolutely critical to unlock these the congestion, if you wish, at crossing points, to reopen critical lifelines like the Jordan corridor. So it's urgent action that is needed now.
Crossings remain restricted, medical evacuations are slow, and thousands of families are sheltering in unsafe, damaged buildings or flooded tents.
The war has forced us to live on top of exposed rebars and crumbling pillars. We now live inside our homes in constant fear for our children. I suffer from nightmares, dreaming my children are gone, or that a pillar or a wall falls on my wife, my daughter, or my son. Life here is full of horror, and each morning we thank God we are still alive and breathing.
The tower. It's crumbling, and we don't know what to do. We have no choice but to live here. Where else could we go? Back to the sewers or the sand? There are insects everywhere. They even reach our faces while we sleep. We were in Khan Yunis this summer, but the heat was unbearable. We couldn't stay in tents, so we fled the scorching heat.
Earlier this month, the U.S. Middle East envoy announced the start of the second phase of the 20-point Trump plan aimed at ending the Gaza conflict. This phase includes moving from ceasefire to disarmament, establishing a technocratic administration, and beginning reconstruction efforts. Hamas and Israel signed a ceasefire agreement that went into effect on Friday, October 10th, as part of the 20-point Trump plan, which includes an immediate cessation of fighting, the release of all hostages, whether alive or dead, and the entry of humanitarian aid into the enclave.
In Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, after months under rebel control, the collapse of the formal banking system has pushed residents onto the streets, where cash exchanges and mobile money have become a lifeline for survival. The situation exposes the deepening economic toll of a war with no clear end in sight.
After nearly a year under M23 and AFC control, daily life in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo has been reshaped by economic collapse as much as by conflict. In Bukavu, sidewalks have turned into open-air banking halls. With formal banks shuttered, residents now depend on street money changers and mobile money agents to access cash and carry on with daily trade. In nearby markets, residents struggle to buy even basic necessities.
Work has become very difficult because there's nowhere to get cash anymore. We deal in virtual money, but since the banks closed, accessing cash is a problem. The hardship affects both us and our customers.
Mobile money, once seen as a lifeline, has brought its own frustrations. Fees charged by telecom companies and cash agents have pushed up costs for traders already operating on thin margins.
We're not used to selling this way. When customers pay by phone, the network takes its share and then the cash agent takes another cut. That's why we struggle with it, and I don't think we'll ever truly adjust.
Further north in Goma, 1 year after the city fell to the AFC and M23, residents describe a fragile calm alongside deepening economic distress. Banks remain closed while residents shop for essentials at Virunga Market.
Before, life was unbearable because of the gunfire and killings. Today, security has improved, but what we want is lasting peace and an end to the war.
Authorities under the AFC and M23 administration credit the relative stability to cooperation between fighters and civilians. But for many, security gains mean little without economic recovery.
This war took everything from us. My husband died while I was pregnant. I gave birth afterward, and he left me with 5 children. We are suffering greatly. Paying the rent and feeding the children has become very difficult.
Economists warn that without functioning financial institutions, the local economy is close to collapse.
People are losing everything. Taxes still exist, yet salaries are unpaid. The formal economy is barely functioning.
Fighting continues across eastern Congo, despite a US-brokered ceasefire and a parallel economic agreement. The government in Kinshasa accuses Rwanda of backing the M23 rebel group, an allegation Kigali continues to deny.
And finally, in the Philippines, an extraordinary physical challenge has become a platform for environmental action. A newly crowned Guinness World Record holder has completed the fastest crossing of the country on foot, using the journey to champion sustainability and responsible outdoor living.
After 148 days on the road, amateur mountaineer and environmental advocate Lito de Viterbo officially entered the Guinness World Records for the fastest on-foot crossing of the Philippines. His historic journey came to an end at Tinaca Point in the coastal municipality of Glan, where celebration quickly turned into action. Joined by volunteers, Lito marked his arrival with a coastal cleanup and a public session promoting the Leave No Trace principles. Lito and volunteers are seen collecting rubbish along the shoreline before gathering for an educational briefing on reducing environmental impact. For Lito, the achievement was never about speed alone.
My journey across the Philippines was a demonstration, a manifestation of what I teach. Towards minimizing our impacts to the environment. For example, during my whole journey, I didn't buy any bottled water for 148 days. And that happened because I brought my own water container, a reusable water container. What I do is I get water from my hotel before leaving the hotel. And along the way, I stop at Carinderia. I stop at eateries, restaurants to fetch some water, to refill my water container.
Throughout the 5-month trek, he followed strict low-waste habits, proving that even extreme endurance challenges can be environmentally responsible. Walking between 16 and 18 kilometers a day, often alone, Lito says the journey reinforced a simple truth about human activity and nature.
My advocacy is focused on minimizing our impacts to the environment. Why do we have to minimize our impacts to the environment? We have to realize that every time we go out and everything that we do, we create impacts to the environment. And these impacts to the environment are mostly harmful. And when we create harmful impacts to the environment, that degrades the environment. All right? So when it degrades the environment, that translates to a long-term effect on the environment. And that's why there's a need to protect the environment. And in my advocacy, I promote environmental awareness towards minimizing those impacts that harmful to the environment.
Standing alongside his Guinness plaque amid Sarangani's coastal landscape, Lito says he hopes his record will resonate beyond the hiking community, inspiring Filipinos to rethink everyday choices.
My legacy would be, I would say, as an inspiration for environment protection. And I'd like to be known as somebody who promotes responsible recreational outdoor activities.
Lito now plans to continue working with communities across the country, using his record-breaking journey as a reminder that protecting the environment does not require extraordinary acts, only consistent, conscious ones.
That's the program today. Remember, you can catch all our top stories and more on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Bye for now.